Salutations and best wishes to you. My name is C.M. Weller, and I write books. Following is an excerpt from one of my novels. The Amity Incident by C.M. Weller. Let me sort this explanation to my understanding, sang Maya Teterik Asri. His jewel-encrusted hands resorted Tarika's carefully filed science permit application in a manner that screamed of his disgust for handling them at all. We are still settling Rukula. Supplies are still falling from Hulua and will continue to do so on a weekly basis until such time as the wormhole closes us away from home forever. The papers were now thoroughly out of order, and the mayor shuffled them even further. And you wish permission to perform science. Pronounced rotted excrement from an unclean animal, now filled with poisonous larvae that smells bad. On the highly hazardous toxic island. Tarika cowered properly on her supplicant's perch.
There is much potential,
she ventured.
We have already seen anomalies in the biota of the planet. We seeded it for comfort, yet decidedly uncomfortable plants and animals have appeared.
And been eliminated, summarized the mayor. Quickly, effectively, and efficiently.
As is right and proper,
Tarika chirped.
I did mention in my humble proposal that the substances initially thought entirely toxic eventually proved to be beneficial. So I wish to study all toxin presence in the blighted lands mentioned.
You would be working alone, said Mayor Teterik, for years on end. Tarika huddled in her place, barely daring to tremble.
I never expected to join a clutch crash. I am known as insane.
Few were the normal Numidid who wished to mate with a scientist of any caliber. It had become so rife that science breeding program had become necessary for the good of the future. You will be heavily monitored for the education of others.
I expected such,
sang Tarika.
I have noted all the precautions to extend my survival in the fourth appendix as requested.
She had to resist the urge to nervously preen her feathers, not in front of such a great man. She kept her wings tucked in and her hands locked together, and her beak pointed at Mayor Teterik in proper reverential awe. Now he was spreading them out on his desk. At least he wasn't spreading them out on the floor in a very ancient gesture of disgust and rejection. Ah, he said, and shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Camouflaged base camp, camouflaged hide, camouflaged clothing.
All the better to avoid any predators should they be present,
she sang. Shuffle, shuffle. Hulua is sending most of this nonsense anyway. For science. Pronounced something hated I must tolerate for the greater good. We will deploy the basics and send clean food by drone. You will record all aspects of life on Toxic Island bar the normal. Eating, ablution, and assorted waste disposal. And you will refrain from any and all forms of vainglory.
Understood and obeyed,
Tarika bobbed. She would only refer to herself as Tarika the Inquisitive in her private and personal journal. For everything else, she was Tarika the Mad. She watched with bated breath as he lined up the papers anew, and only breathed out when the stamp of approval descended on each and every page. You may go forth and commit science. Pronounced disgusting thing I no longer have to be involved with. We will send the details to your domicile. Tarika only dared breathe properly after she shut the door behind herself. Cleared! and more importantly, cleared to study firsthand a veritable cornucopia of new things, an entire island's worth. Toxic Island was a dreadful misnomer. It was almost a continent. Aside from the inland sea and the rivers crisscrossing it, it represented thousands of square flights worth of investigative research, years and years of waking up to discover something new, and without the merest nod to personal supervision. Tarika preened herself every chance she got, almost danced all the way to her modest little cubby of a home. Not even a home. There was a tiny bunk nest and an almost impossibly small perch near the infonet port. The rest of it was full of books and half-finished studies, the latter of which were deemed unnecessary, since the lead scientist in charge of the project survived them. Nobody would be working with her on this one. She knew it. It was just simply too crazy. Tarika sighed as she put her books in order and reluctantly disposed of her former, almost done presentations. There would be no room for the half-finished and never-to-be-finished projects on her expedition. But it still felt like she was tearing her own gizzard out. She'd worked hard on each and every one of them, and she would never be allowed to complete them. As far as the flock was concerned, all her contributions amounted to replicated data, and that was that. Not even a footnote in the Book of Deeds. It was illogical to mourn the loss of those things. Ridiculous, possibly stupid. Those who shared the floor with her certainly let her know so. Tarika put them carefully into a waistbag nonetheless, swallowed her noises of distress and upset, lest her neighbours hear and mock her again. Of course, she was ridiculous and stupid and foolhardy and illogical and irrational. She was a scientist. It was what she was best suited for and what best fit her soul. She carried the clinking bag carefully down the stairs and placed it with the whispered apology into the dumpster. Cruel her hands would have her good work from now on.
Spring cleaning at last, eh?
Chirped Kikiki, a student and a dancer, one of the many who lived in the small flats for economic reasons.
You do know it's unhealthy to eat the bugs who invade your nest, right? I am aware,
Tarika sang, trying to keep her voice and intonations positive.
I do not breed bugs in my home, and if I did, I would certainly not be eating them.
Kikiki appeared to have not heard.
You scientists have the worst habits. I swear I saw one male eat a filth bug just because it crossed his notes. No wonder you all have bad feathers and sparse plumage.
Tarika, who kept her feathers properly groomed and released her stresses through her personal journal, instead of indulging in plume plucking, politely muttered a
"No wonder,"
very coldly as she turned to her little hideaway. She couldn't help hearing Kikiki mutter,
antisocial scientists,
to the universe at large. You expect someone to be nice to you when you don't listen. You perpetuate ignorant stereotypes and you ignore anything that someone has to say, Tarika didn't say out loud. She would not help the cause of science by being vocal and argumentative. Keep her head down, her feathers unruffled, and her manner at least polite for as long as she could stand it before making an excuse to leave. That was her hidden agenda, an excuse to leave.